So hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is one that I am so excited to be doing, to be talking about. I got to chat to the lovely Alan Taylor, who was executive producer and also directed the first two episodes of season 1 of Interview with the Vampire. That show has just, whoa, it's incredible. It is such an incredible show. What's my hair doing? Season 1 was just spellbinding. It took over my life. I loved it. It's the show that made me want to go back and read the Interview with the Vampire book and continue on with the series. I have really loved my time with this show so much. I cannot wait for season 2. So it was incredible to get to sit down and talk to Alan about some of my favourite scenes, which came from the first episode. The first episode, in my opinion, is just out of this world. If you haven't seen Interview with the Vampire yet, one, I'm not sure why you're watching this video. And two, go watch it. Alan has obviously worked on many other projects. He's been part of the MCU. He worked on Game of Thrones. He worked on House of the Dragon. He's had a part to play in so many different projects over the years. But yeah, this interview is focused on Interview with the Vampire because we talked all things about his episodes, about season 1, about comparisons with the books and whatnot. And it was such a fun chat. And he's such a wonderful person. Yeah. Here is my chat with Alan Taylor. It's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and to chat.
Oh, my pleasure. In fact, a friend just asked me, "Why are you talking to somebody about Interview with the Vampire? It's already been out for a year." And I realize I'm happy to talk about Interview with the Vampire any chance I get because it's something I actually am proud of and love. So happy to talk about it.
I love that. Um, I watched the behind the scenes for season 1, and I love how invested everybody was in it. And you could see it on all of your faces.
Yeah, it was really nice. I think it's part, for many of it went back to a love for the novel, um, which came out so long ago. I just moved to New York and I read it and just took my brain over, and I thought it was wonderful. I think everybody who was there felt some personal connection to Anne Rice's
Mm.
story, and the fact that we were shooting in New Orleans, in her old neighborhoods, and in the very houses that she had, mentioned in the book, it made it feel personal for all of us.
I kind of missed the boat, I think, for the film because the film was 90s, I think. I was born in
I
90s.
think I don't think you're right for the demographics. I think you would have been too young, and then it would have been too old. And uh, I saw the movie because I was such a fan of the novel that I sort of felt like I had to see it. And we all went in with trepidation because Tom Cruise was a big movie star, and we thought it was terrible casting. And then, like Anne Rice, I think, at least for me, I came out thinking he did a great job
Mm.
as Lestat. I thought Kirsten Dunst, was, you know, wonderful as the child. I think the weak link was poor old Brad Pitt, who didn't really have a great character to play. I think there's a lot to admire. I mean, I think the direction was quite beautiful. We benefited from having more time and from some very bold choices that our writer made um, to adjust the material.
No, I love that though, because I got really big into horror when I was 11 or 12. It's the average age of deciding I want to watch the cool stuff. And it was my mom who was like, well, then you gotta watch the classics. You gotta watch The Crow. You gotta watch Dracula, and you have to watch Interview with the Vampire.
Which Dracula did she make you watch?
Bram Stoker's.
Like Coppola's Dracula, or yeah, because there's several hundred to choose from. But
I know there's so many. But like with Interview with the Vampire, I liked the film, but I never got into the books. I kind of watched the film and moved on.
mm,
And it would come up every now and again throughout the years. And I was like, I'll get around to it eventually. And I never did. And it wasn't until I finished the show that I was out of my mind obsessed. And I was like, I have to get the books. I've just finished, I think I've just finished Queen of the Damned. I did the audiobooks and now I'm physically reading them.
wow, okay, so you're doing much more thorough digging in than I did. I fell in love with the first novel, and then we all, like addicts, ran off for Lestat, the second one.
Mm.
He was everybody's real hero. And then I kind of peeled away with Queen of the Damned, and I have not been back for things, for the umpteen things that came afterwards. Uh, but I love the fact that she kept her universe going, and I was really committed to coming in and trying to be part of telling the story of the first novel. That was sort of as far as my ambitions went. And we actually, I think, were attempting to do. I think there was an original version of the first season where we were trying to do the whole novel, and then we realized it was just racing along too fast, and for budget reasons and story reasons, we had to divide it, and that was sort of a big readjust at the last minute to turn it into basically two seasons doing the first novel.
It would have been a lot for one season, to be fair,
Well,
the
yeah,
novel.
yeah, yeah.
It would have been a lot. I mean, like I said, it's been through so many different tellings before. And when it came to your attention about the show, what were some of your first thoughts, your initial responses to that? I mean, were you really excited to get into it? Were you a bit apprehensive?
Um, let's see. I guess both the things you just mentioned. When I first heard of it, my initial reaction was, yes, that's mine. That I should do that because I had personal connection. For me, was reading the novel when I just moved to New York, and I really believed the novel. She had this power to make you think that, of course, vampires are real. They've always been real. Why, don't be a jerk.
Right.
And somehow moving to New York and everybody felt like a vampire, and it had a real grip on me at the time. My sister and I read it at the same time. And we both were sort of taken over by it. So I felt that kind of compulsion. Also, I've done enough work by now that it's rare that something comes along you feel a personal culture connection to.
Mm.
Um, as a child, I read the Narnia books, and um, as a young adult, I read the Ripley um, books by Patricia Highsmith, and really Interview with the Vampire was up there, and that level of sort of personal connection to something where I felt like I wish I could be involved in telling these stories. So that, but yeah, trepidation because we don't want to screw it up, and you don't know who you're getting involved with as collaborators because it was already in motion when I joined. Roland was already writing scripts, uh, and I went into it wary about choices that we were making, and wanting to make sure that we delivered on them, and knowing that we might alienate part of the fan base by some of the choices we were making. Um, so I think we went in braced for hoping we'd be embraced by those who love the novels, but knowing we might get jumped on for changing things and stuff too. So it was a mixed feeling. And then as it came together, and I realized how serious Roland was about it, and how much respect he had for it, and the intelligence behind the decisions he'd made, changed some things. And then as we got our cast, when we Jacob and Sam, it just started to feel like it was going to work because we sort of believed in our vampires, and that was and you could feel the crew kind of believing in the vampires, and so it felt like it might pull it off.
Well, I could imagine it would have been very easy with Sam and Jacob. I mean, they are incredible. They're incredible as the leads. It's interesting that you bring up some of the changes that were made because, like I said, my mom loved the film, and I don't think Interview was on my radar, to be fair. She watched it,
Oh, really?
and
Okay,
she came to me.
I should be talking to her.
Oh, she loves it. She came to me and was like, "You have to watch this new show. You have got," and I was like, "Okay, like I'll get around to it. I will." And she was like, "No, seriously, you need to watch it. Just trust me. Trust me." And our taste in things is very different. I was like, "Okay, I'll watch the first episode, okay?" I watched the first episode and I was taken. I mean, I was absolutely obsessed.
That's
Um,
perfect. That's exactly what you hope the first episode will do to people. So that's good to hear.
but I think a lot of those changes worked because it really did open the story to a whole new generation and it made it more relatable and grounded in ways.
It did. I think it related to issues that people are dealing with now. And what he managed to do was take two things, sexual orientation and also race, and not just sort of plunk them in, to be sort of, oh, look, we're being woke or we're being modern. He actually chased them down as themes and as character
Mm,
struggles so that they really empowered the material. And the relationship between uh, Louis from an affluent black family and this sort of old world, old moneyed white guy coming in, the tensions that are just built right into that dynamic worked really, really well with the dynamic that Anne Rice had created between the characters. And so
mm.
there are many ways where, and you should pray for this, that seeing this dynamic, it's sort of hard to imagine it not being this way because it sort of
Exactly, yeah.
it tells so well. I would, on the way in, I was wary of being as explicit um, with their sexual relationship. I came into it thinking that Anne Rice had created a kind of metaphor for all of our sexualities, and that's what vampirism was, and that's why it was so compelling that human sexuality kind of fell away and seemed trivial by comparison to the vampire experience. So I had all these ideas about it, but Roland was the one who said, no, this, I think we're being dishonest if we don't really play this as a love story between two men. Um, in his mind, it was sort of always that way, but just not delivered on explicitly. And so he
Mm.
insisted on being very uh, you know very much grounding in that story and that experience. And it and I think I think it really worked people partly because they realized it was being done thoughtfully and respectfully, and but we were aware that we were going to lose some people and we were going to gain some people, and
I think it was the absolute perfect decision to make because, like I said, I was just gripped from that end, and we'll talk about that in a bit. The end of episode one. Oh my Lord, it got me. Um, but for you, I mean, you were executive producer, but you were also director for the first two episodes.
right.
And coming in, kind of being at the helm, setting the tone in certain ways for how the story will be told and how it will be delivered on screen. I imagine that must have been pretty daunting for you.
I mean, it's daunting. It's also the fun part, obviously, if you get to do that with anything, which is why directors always want to do pilots, and why we still chase feature films, because that's sort of um, the director's job is to try and build that world. So it was daunting. Again, I think I felt some confidence because I loved the material so much. I felt like I knew how it should look and smell and feel. And
Mm.
then as we had Mara as a production designer, and I'd always loved the work she'd done. And as she started to build the sets, going into Lestat's apartment and seeing that she'd hung Edvard Munch paintings on the walls, or going into the Dubai um, penthouse that she was designing and seeing Francis Bacon and Jean-Michel Basquiat. It felt like she really was getting into their characters' heads. So she seemed very strong. We were in a panic about the director of photography, which is like the most important thing for me, the quality of the light and how it looks. And none of the people I worked with were available, so we were like down to like about to shoot in a week and had
Oh.
nobody. And then by our good fortune, somebody else's bad fortune, a movie got canceled. I knew somebody on the movie. They called me and mentioned their movie was being canceled just before shooting, and so I immediately called their DP and yanked him onto our show. And because nobody was available at that time, and that was David Tattersall, who's an older guy. He shot everything from Star Wars to epics to very sort of gritty stories, and much of the look is because of him.
So I guess it was a happy disaster
Oh,
that,
yeah, by a seat of our pants. I mean, these things, when things work, they usually work, just barely.
yeah, with how season one was filmed, I know it must have been a very difficult time with restrictions and how everything was at the time. Um,
Everyone wearing masks all the time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and down to silly things like Sam and Jacob had to do chemistry reads through Zoom, wasn't it? Through like online things.
Yeah. We came down to, without naming names, there were two Lestats and two Louis that were sort of down to the wire, and we had to read everybody against everybody. So I know it's exhausting for everyone. And yeah, the absurdity of a chemistry read is you're trying to see how they are in the room together. And we were all in
Yeah.
different, not only different on screens, but different time zones. I think Sam was in Australia, and we were in New Orleans, and Jacob was probably in London. So completely. um, but luckily, it was obvious, and the chemistry has just grown from the beginning. So thank God for that.
Yeah, it's so natural and organic with them that it really does just kind of it just pours out of them. But for you then trying to get everything set up, trying to get everything beginning actually in person, what was that like? Was that difficult for you? I mean, trying to meet people for the first time in person.
Yeah, I mean, there's a joy finally when people start turning up, and you're actually going to be in the room together. And there's moments when the cast are allowed to take their masks off. So at least you people in front of the camera look
Somewhat normal.
yeah. And we all went through that, and it's amazing how quickly it becomes sort of normal.
Mm.
The Everyone was testing for COVID every 2 days, and everyone was wearing masks, and every few days somebody would drop out um, because we get a positive, and you have to reschedule around them. Um, but it's amazing how quickly the industry adjusted to coping with that. And beyond that, it was just I think a lot of it was just everybody gathering in New Orleans and being in that environment, which felt like it was one of the characters, and so it's sort of and also shooting in New Orleans on vampire hours is great. You shoot all night, and you come home and you like sit on the stoop of the house we were in and drink wine as people went off to work and the sun came up, and it just felt like we were living a vampire lifestyle.
Like you were in it,
Yeah,
literally. That
right.
must have been
And
incredible.
I was living around the corner from Lestat's house, so I could just sort of walk to work to shoot in Lestat's townhouse, which is the actual townhouse mentioned in the books. I was living in the French Quarter, so um, it really felt like a magical time. And the crews in New Orleans have a different sort of vibe to them than many other crews. There's something, they seem young and relaxed and creative, and so yeah, it felt like a very good sort of nurturing environment for the show.
Sounds absolutely magic. It's my dream. It's my dream to get out to some of the shooting locations.
Yes, we'll go to New Orleans.
It is on my bucket list for real. But there's some scenes in episode one that step out just visually, be it how it's presented or the tone. And one of them would be Louis and Lestat's first proper meeting. So they're sitting down with Lily. And looking back on it now, it is very much setting the tone for their relationship. That they're constantly trying to get the one up on the conversation. They're both trying to come out the winner of the situation. Was that intentional to try and set the tone for the rest of the season?
Yeah, we knew that was a big deal the first time they actually come face to face, and lest that comes into the conversation at a higher level because he's very aware of Louis and is sort of targeting him already. And
Mm.
Louis is sort of on his back foot, wondering who the hell is this guy? Why is he being so intense with me? And again, there's sort of the natural rivalry between these two handsome men of different classes and different races in this time, and sort of in a situation where they're competing over the same woman. It's all charged, and quite deliberately. And Louis sort of loses that round. He gets outclassed, kind of. But in fact, I think Lestat is more besotted with Louis at that point than Louis is with him. So the power relationship is very sort of volatile. We shot that in one day at a location where it was scripted to be sort of an interior set, and we moved it onto the balcony so we could sort of enjoy the setting more. Uh, and I recall it all going quite well. Remember, there was something fancy we tried to do when Lestat talks about the music and the camera kind of flies across the room, and we were talking about sort of the jazz, the birth of jazz at the time.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was fairly straightforward power, you know, struggle between these two
The gorgeous
guys.
scene and visually as well, stunning. But one of the other scenes that is probably my favorite from the episode. It's so small. It's such a small scene, but it's during the wedding scene, and it's a cutaway shot of there's two glasses on a table, and it's just it's a simple little shot of these two glasses. They're cleaning up after the wedding, and
Oh, right, right,
there's
right.
just something so still and beautiful about it. And I was
Oh,
just,
that's really wow. That's really nice of you to pick up on that. There was a we dropped a scene because we didn't have time to get to it. There was going to be sort of a transition scene between the wedding and the next morning, and then it just became important to sort of track the shift from the celebration of the evening into the sort of quiet of the next morning with the two brothers going up on the roof, which
yeah,
became was one of my favorite scenes. Uh, and so yeah, that's wow. You really picked up the details. It was just an attempt to sort of say to have that sort of the morning after the dawn light coming, sort of feeling sort of the down after the big celebration, but also kind of hopeful. And the two boys are having a good time and everything's looking rosy, but of course not for very long.
yeah.
Um, and I liked the shots that took them up onto the roof. Uh, we shot all that in location with a couple of stuntmen going up on the roof, and also the two actors did some of the climbing. And then, of course, once they got on the roof, we're
Mm.
on a blue screen set somewhere. But yeah, wow, good eye. That's a tiny detail, as you say, but it was very much sort of a turning point uh, because everything darkens from that. After that, with the dawn,
Yep.
everything starts to slide off.
Yep, a pretty heavy scene happens after that. But there's moments like that sprinkled throughout these episodes, and I'm not gonna try and put a number on the amount of times that I've watched it because it is embarrassing. I mean,
Wow,
this show,
I'm so
seriously,
grateful. Your mom was so right. Apparently, she knows you. I
she
guess.
was, and she never lets me live it down to this day. If I restart it, she's like, "I told you about that," and I'm like, I know you did." But I was wondering, is there any shots like that that you felt particularly proud of? A little moment or something that you personally fought to get included, fought to get put in that you thought was just stunning for whatever reason?
Wow. It's funny. I was proud of the look that we brought to it, and there were moments that I felt I wasn't sure were going to work. That I remember thinking from this distance, it's all sort of a blur. But I remember liking the final shot that pulls back on the church
Hmm.
on the altar. There's a shot in episode 2 that was something I invented that I'd never tried before. That has become sort of a device they've used again. I think where the vampires are going for a stroll through the quarter, and instead of them walking, I put them both on treadmills and circled them with the camera. So it looks as though they're walking, but there's something kind of dreamy in the way they're passing through the neighborhood because things are shifting in a way that doesn't really make physical sense, but you have a sense of these two men who are sort of in love at this point, walking together. They're both stoned too, because Louis is drunk blood for the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And there was a way of capturing a kind of psychology of being happy and stoned and in love. And it was one of the things where the crew saw me doing it and was thinking, what on earth how is this going to work? And then it actually does kind of feel magical, I think, when you see them. In fact, when I saw later in episodes, they stole it and used it again with Claudia. There's like three of them walking on this same treadmill trick. Well, there are other moments that I like the moment when Louis is exposed to sunlight for the first time. I think that's episode 2, actually.
Oh yeah, with the milk scene.
Where he pours the milk on himself,
Yeah.
and we were able to time it so we could actually use real sunlight as the enemy, kind of having to step in from the shadows. Uh, there's some things in Lestat's chamber. The whole device of how the doors open for the coffin room and the counterweights and all that stuff was things we invented just because we thought it would look cool.
And it did.
Pushing a button on the mantelpiece so that it opens the doors, and it was sort of the fun of having, or the thing, the crank he turns to close off the skylight. These are all sort of bat cave ideas that we came up with that we thought, if you were a very wealthy vampire, what fun stuff would you have? And so it was fun doing that sort of level of invention.
It was very unique as well, the little things around Lestat's house. Like you said, touches like that, that is
yeah,
just.
Mara, you could just wander in that house, and every choice made so much sense. The kind of Art Nouveau aesthetic, but with sort of painters that were edgy at the moment, highly refined, but decadent, sort of. Yeah, she did great. She really expressed Lestat's character with that. It was one of the shoots where I felt proud of the way we shot it, and there were many shots where I thought, oh, that's really expressive. It's not always like that, particularly when you're sort of covering scenes. And this one felt a bit more poetic in its imagery. And gratefully pick out something as subtle and trivial as a shot of 2 glasses, but the ones that come to mind are the ones where it was sort of harder to
Bigger
do.
scenes.
Yeah, trying to do sort of vampire vision, like sort of what it's like to look through their eyes, where sort of, where you do sort of flares and some kind of refractions. That was a bit that was tricky, or sort of hyper zooms where you can suddenly see details in the distance. So that was sort of fun to work on.
Yeah, I have some notes about the vampire vision and the vampire powers in regards to Lestat, because so in episode 1 we see he shows his power twice, I think, to Louis. Well, before the church scene. There's
Right.
the
Oh, yeah. I mean, where he messes with time. I love the scene of the poker
yeah.
room, the mess with time. That was something we argued about because there's big debate as to, okay, what is his power exactly? Can he change the flow of time? We didn't think that he'd had that power. What I came down on was that he can affect the way time is perceived by
Okay.
other people. But he doesn't actually have the power to change, the flow of time or anything. But both in the church and in the poker room, what he's doing is messing with humans' perception of time. So he sort of creates an envelope where everyone else is going into sort of slow motion, and he and Louis are the only ones who are still experiencing time normally. Sort of. So that was a lot of fun. A lot of experimenting with how do you poker chips slow down and stop before they hit the table, or
Yeah.
pouring liquid that then almost freezes on the pour. And the actors, I was amazed by the actors because most of that is just the actors freezing and just holding the position still. And these are a bunch of like guys in their 50s. I thought they'd be like,
Yeah, breathing at least.
yeah, breathing at least. But they did a great job of just freezing, sort of like the glistening in their eyes, just sort of locked.
Yeah.
And it creates a really wonderful little private space for Lestat and Louis for a moment there. So that was a fun power to try and get your head around.
Yeah, and it does kind of, it isolates them in a way too, because like you said, like with the treadmill scene where they're walking and it's kind of out of place, but it's them in their own little world. They're in like a bubble.
Right.
I
Yeah.
kind
So
of,
in a way, some of these things were just sort of how do you create a love story? It's how do you create an intensity around 2 people where
yeah.
that feeling we all get where the rest of the world goes away and it's just, you're hyper aware of each other and nothing else. It happened to be vampire powers, but it was it's like a romantic trick in a way. And then there was some debate later on at the end of that where time slows again. He chases the vicar down to
In the
get through the door.
church. Mm.
And there was some debate as to whether that was breaking any rules, but again, I think it was. What I liked was that in the poker scene we saw or a few times we see vampires seem to move super fast. When he attacks the lamplighter at one point, he seems to move, or when Louis steps across his Dubai um, penthouse to sort of turn off the tape recorder, he does that sort of impossible vampire move where suddenly they're
You
in
barely
one
see
place.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I thought it'd be fun to show that from the vampire's point of view, where they're moving normally, but everything else is
Super
slowing.
slow. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we did with the vicar, and um, Vicar's running as fast as he can, but he's barely moving across the church, like those bad dreams where you can't run. Um,
Visually, it
and
was
Lestat is
stunning.
yeah,
Visually, I did. I love those little moments, but I just thought I'd ask you because I wasn't sure. That's kind of what I thought it was too, that it was like him bringing Louis in to be kind of a part of it almost.
yeah, it's sort of to implicate him and to sort of show off for him, kind of.
Yeah, but like you said, I couldn't tell, was it a personal changing the flow of time for everybody or just for him and Louis? That's just why I touched on that point.
Feel free to join the discussion because it was ongoing. It was like we kept arguing about it. Some people thought he had the power to change gravity and time and all this stuff, and I felt like that was too much power. That most of his power should reside over affecting humans around
Yeah.
him. Um, but no, the debate rages on, and I'm not sure there's a definite answer in Anne Rice either. I think there's the powers seem to come and go and ebb and flow, and who can fly and who can't fly, and um, there's there's ongoing debate.
That's interesting though, because it keeps it fluid, I guess, in a way, and the
It
possibilities
does,
in are
yeah, yeah,
endless.
yeah, yeah. And it's not like a set of hard rules. It's a part of the fun for Anne Rice was that she took a bunch of rules and just chucked them, like
Mm.
the whole fear of crucifixes and holy water. That's all bullshit.
Yeah.
And once she said that, you sort of believed everything she said after that. It was like this, you felt like you were getting the real deal. But no, I think there is some debate, and that's one of the great things about her treatment of vampires is they don't really know. They're figuring this stuff out too.
Yeah.
They Lestat is aware of some powers he's discovered. Not all vampires have the same powers. It's not going to be the same for everybody, which again is a kind of human, relatable thing of what are we capable of, what can we do, where do we come from? All those questions that are human
Yeah.
questions are very much vampire questions too.
All those heavy questions that I like to avoid. All those deep eating questions. I'm like, I will not think about
Well,
them.
it's
We are
kind of what I
good.
do. They come and bite you with the vampires come and bring them right back to you.
Keeping with the stats power for a couple minutes, there's another shot that's one of my favorites. And I think it's in Lestat's house. I think it's in his sitting room or his parlor. But
Yeah.
it's just after the love scene, I think, between him and Louis, where he levitates and he brings Louis up into the air with him.
Oh yeah, boy, that was tricky.
And the direct parallel then that comes later when he flies for the second time with Louis in a much more devastating way that
Yeah.
left me in tears, by the way.
Wow, good. Yeah.
Um, did you know that that parallel was going to be made when you did that initial first scene?
Yeah, we knew that the levitation was going to be, you know, sort of the height of romance. And again, the feeling that we've all had. If you kiss somebody and it goes really well, you both feel like you're levitating. It's something we all experience as humans, and so to make it literal. And yes, we knew that the big fight was going to happen later at Lestat's house, and it was going to climax with Lestat taking him up and dropping him. I did not. I was not directing that one, so I just sort of took my hands off of the latter one. Um, but we knew there was a parallel there. The and obviously very different technologies involved because the first one was subtle and in the room and very intimate, and the later one
Smaller. Yeah.
there's blue screen and there's lots wires and all kinds of stuff being used to achieve it. But yeah, it makes sense that things that are thrilling about your new lover also wind up being devastating. So the things that draw you or the things that hurt you, there's all kinds of romantic truth and somebody lifts you off your feet, there's a very good chance they'll smash you on the ground at some
Well, if
point.
Louis and Lestat has taught me anything, it is yes. As soon as you start levitating, get the fuck down. No, thank you.
Let me go. Let me go.
I want to talk about the church scene because this, I think, is where I was taken. I enjoyed the first episode. I really did like it, but that the whole scene in the church at the end of episode one, I feel like I understood them. I understood the show. I understood what I was supposed to be invested in, and it really did make me fall in love. But the confessional scene with Louis being so
Yeah.
up close and intimate in his face, it's almost like you're intruding, like you shouldn't be there. You're intruding on that scene in comparison to how small he feels when he comes out into the huge church. And that was shot on location, wasn't it? In an actual church?
Yeah, it was all. I mean, it's very hard to get. permission from any church to do a gay vampire murder scene. We were lucky that there was I'm not sure you call it, a decommissioned, excommunicated. There was an ex-church that was privately owned, but it was in terrible disarray. The ceiling was mostly collapsed. The floor was largely torn up. So Mara and her team had to go in and refurbish it. And turns out the hardest thing to do was to get that many pews. Pews are hard to get a hold of. We were scouring the country for pews to fill it up and make it look like a functioning church. But no, it was on location. The interior was shot totally in camera by the time she finished it. The confessional was built on location there, and we also had a portable version of it where we could shoot the interiors on a stage for his close-up coverage. But everything from the outside of the confessional that we established the confessional earlier when his brother goes to confess because he just loves to confess. And then when we come back later, we will see Louis going into it and coming back out of it. Of course, when he comes back out, the world is transformed in flames and there's blood everywhere. And the real drama begins with Lestat. But yeah, that was quite a scene for Jacob. It was one of the billion times I was impressed with him because he nailed it over and over again. It was a very, very long monologue to the priest with nothing to cut to except him, because we don't really want to see the priest except maybe the shadow through the grill. So lots of angles, and his takes really varied. They were all truthful, different levels of anguish. And this is a guy who I'd only seen play Grey Worm, on
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, and to see the range of violent vulnerability and stuff in him was really beautiful. He really did a great job. And then the shot Bring Them Out was fun. That was designed by my partner. Jane Wu is an amazing storyboard artist, and she's also very successful now. Her show Blue Eye Samurai just won all the animation awards this year for best whatever. But she did storyboards for the action scenes in Vampire, and so that shot that brings him out, where it sort of pans over and you find Lestat nibbling on the. You follow the trail of blood.
And Lestat is just messing shit up in the middle of the church.
Yeah, somehow the church is burning already. We don't really know how, and the priest is a mess. Yeah.
But that whole scene, everything about it. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, the slow walking up to the pews, the way he stands after killing the first priest. So it's as soon as Louis comes out of the confessional, Lestat is like hunched over doing his thing. But when he sees Louis, he stands up in a really unnatural way.
Right. That's a famous. You got to do that at least once. In fact, it's so famous that even like What We Do in the Shadows makes fun of it because it's sort of become a cliche in the vampire world. But we had to do it. So yeah, Louis comes out and draws his sword cane and tries to stab him several times to be done with him. He gets flung off, and there's a side story about Louis being flung because we had a stuntman do the fall when Lestat throws him across this, and he lands against a pew and hits the hard marble floor. Our stuntman only did one take, and he was knocked unconscious and had to go to the hospital to achieve that. And that's the take that's in the show because we didn't do another take. And luckily,
just one take for that.
Yeah, well, because he was supposed to hit the floor and then shuffle back, and he wasn't shuffling. We all realized something had gone horribly wrong, and he was actually unconscious on the floor because he hit the marble so hard. So thankfully, he recovered. He's fine and no hard feelings. But that's the shot that's in there. And then Lestat does the famous vampire rise where they defy gravity as they get to their feet. So it started with Nosferatu in the silent movies, and we've been doing it ever since. So there's a little bit of a danger of being sort of silly, but I think in the context with the fact that what's going on, it has a nice power to it. And we don't make a big deal out of it. It sort of happens over there. It's one of the many things that vampires like to do. So then he approaches him, and there's something nice and understated about he goes off to kill the next vicar who happens upon the scene.
Yeah. Was that done with wires, or was it done in reverse? How did you get that?
The rising up?
Yeah.
The rising up. That's the old fashioned way. There's a wire, and he's got a harness, and so he's able to rise up to his feet and take maybe one step, and then you have to cut because you have to sort of detach the rig that got him up, and then you have to continue from there. So it's just a piece. And there's a real trick to it because you can look ridiculous when you're doing it, but Sam was very good at the vampire choreography and knew how to sort of land on his feet in a way that made it feel like he was defying natural laws, but not by magic. not by not by wires.
But if anyone could pull
So
that
yeah,
off, it probably would be Sam. I know he like loves vampires, and there's something kind of vampiric about him.
we didn't realize what a hardcore vampire fan he was until we cast him. It turns out he'd read every Anne Rice book. Anytime there was a question about lore, the writers would go to him to ask him. And yeah, in book 9, Lestat's nephew says he knew all that stuff. Um, and both of the actors just totally immersed themselves because I don't think I knew going in just how much we were asking of them. Sam is from Australia. I have to sound like a Frenchman by way of England living in the States who
Mm,
can play concert piano and compose opera and perform. These are all skills he had to pick up on the fly. Jacob had to learn tap dancing. He's English. He had to speak like he had two accents. One was contemporary, aristocratic for now, and the other one was a Creole uh, upper class, African American. So the demands we put on them in terms of like piano lessons and language and accents and dancing and choreography. It was old fashioned movie star stuff. They had to learn everything in a crash course. So and part of that was yes, how do you stand up on wires and look like you know what you're doing?
and with the dancing as well, I'd wondered between Louis and Paul, the tap dancing scene, was that how much that was them and how much was doubles? Like
That was
that's
entirely them. We had double to come in case we wanted to do close to their feet and stuff, and we had the double standing by and almost never used them because Paul, it turned out we'd cast because he was a wonderful actor with a heartbreaking quality, but it turned out he was a
yeah.
professional dancer too. We didn't know that when we cast him. So Paul had it down, and Paul was helping Jacob, who would spend his weekend tap dancing with the coach. And so by the time we came to shoot it, we didn't need the doubles, uh, and the energy between these two guys as brothers was so good that we didn't want to break it with cutaways to professional dancing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's wild.
That's amazing. I would have assumed it was doubles.
No, there was I think there are probably a couple of shots in there, must be from behind, and maybe we did something on the feet where we let ourselves use the doubles because we got them, so why not use them? But it's they had the routine down and they just did it over and over and over again. So they
I think I got us off topic there. I'm sorry. We'll go back to the church.
okay.
There's one particular shot. It's just as Louis backing up towards the altar and Eustache is coming towards him. You know, he looks a little bit tormented. He's to wipe the blood off his face. He takes off the jacket and he comes down to Louis's eye level. And the dialogue in that with the visuals, him telling him, be all the beautiful things you are and be them without apology in front of an altar.
Yeah.
You know, as somebody who struggled with sexuality and religion a lot as a teenager, that blew my mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for
Um,
years, people have been wrestling with exactly that, that struggle, that dichotomy. So many European filmmakers wrestling with the church, sexuality. How do we make sense of these things? Fellini spent a lot of time on that stuff. And this one I knew was, hypercharged, and the setting of the church was just like over the top and wonderful and kind of. We had one issue I had was that the scene does sort of turn and become kind of romantic, and you want to start believing what Lestat is saying,
mm,
and he's speaking so vividly to Louis and to us that you should want to go with him. And so we had this problem. He was completely drenched in blood and stuff from the first two murders. So there's a bit of sleight of hand when he's walking towards Louis, and he sort of goes like
yes.
that,
Yeah.
and a lot comes off. He's basically just a walking blood bag, and doing that, and then suddenly he becomes slightly more of a romantic leading man in that moment. So we let ourselves do some cheat a little bit there, and then of course he's just he's so beautiful, and his voice is so beautiful that he was doing most of the work, just making us want to believe in this. But this is where it got very risky, and this is a white aristocrat talking to a black man about his black experience, written by a white writer, directed by a white guy. There's so many ways we could have stank up the joint and gotten it wrong, or
Mm.
guessed, spoken from outside of some experience. I really think Roland worked very, very hard and did a great job with it. And I think it does work with people, and I think it really affected Jacob hearing it and stuff too. So I think again, it was risky, but I think Roland did. And I'm not sure exactly how much. And you know the novels at this point more than I do, but I think some of the dialogue comes directly from the novel, and so he's got that power behind him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that because there's actually a good bit of dialogue from the book. It's in that scene, but it's not in that scene. It's the voiceover for that scene where it's modern day
Oh,
Louis
oh, oh,
telling Daniel,
right, right,
um,
right.
an awful lot of that is from the book, actually, where he says the drum was my heart and the other drum was his.
Yeah.
I was
You're right.
wondering, so how did you guys come to the decision what quotes to pick, what ones to include?
Roland was really doing the script entirely. The only idea was I argued with him about certain things, but in terms of what how to bring the books to the script, that was entirely Roland. And he spent a lot of time um, on his own working that out. And he was in love with the language. I mean, every episode I think has a quote from the book as its title,
Yeah.
and the idea of the two drums was something that meant a lot to him, and it was just beautiful dialogue. So you knew it was going to work, kind of the end and the beginning.
And then moving into episode two, there's somewhat of a lighter aspect to that one, I suppose. I mean, as light as you can get after what just happened. I mean, the graveyard scene I found comical. Louis
Yeah, good.
fighting
Yeah,
for
yeah,
his
yeah.
life. He's crying, he's puking, he's trying to drink the blood off the floor, and Lestat is just there rambling on about God knows what. But there's
Yeah,
a
and trying to find physical comedy, like stuffing the priest
into the
into
thing,
the
yeah.
book.
Oh my God. It's so
Yeah,
Lestat
originally,
though.
what's that?
It's so Lestat. That one move was so him.
That was a fake crypt built on top of another crypt, so we weren't actually disturbing the bones of, but there was a it was very much a real graveyard. And originally it began in the church, and it was my idea that we should move on, be done with the church. So we start in the graveyard, and the church is in the background,
Yeah.
so we understand that sort of think progress has been made. But yeah, the wheelbarrow and the practicalities of cleaning up afterwards, because Lestat is kind of fastidious.
Mm.
There's something inherently funny about that, and also Jacob did a great job of being stoned for the first time in his life, kind of going from throwing up and the heroin experience to all of a sudden when it hits him and he gets the rush and he
Healing.
starts to see the eyes of vampire and that wonderful laugh that Sam gives when he sees that it's hitting him, and
Yeah.
he's crossed over, uh, which I'm happy to see. They keep using the trailer, which is nice. So, one of our vampire vision things. The close up of Sam with sort of the lights, shifting through it and flaring and things.
The angelic lights around him. That's what I was going to ask about. Whose idea was it to get those? I mean, there's quite a few up close and personal shots, but that in particular was stunning, and it was stylistically different to what we'd seen because it was so bright and
Yeah, it was bright with lots of backlight, lots of there were guys holding lights off camera, trying to flare them in the lens,
yeah.
and then but I think we kept the fact that focus shallow so that he had sort of lean into focus. To all of us trying to make it feel like a sort of drug point of view, but it only really worked because Sam could explode with that incredible charismatic, you know, proprietary laugh.
It's a stunning
And then
scene.
we go from there for the scroll on the treadmills, right? When they walk through town.
In episode two, the relationship does deepen. I mean, Louis himself says it that death, rebirth, coming out, homicide, it's a lot. And the first two episodes, they are a lot. I mean, the first episode's the longest in the season. I think it's an hour and 10, and episode two is quite long as well. For you,
Huh.
was that difficult to take on, trying to find the pacing of telling all of this story in such a small chunk of time?
I was grateful. I mean, it felt like we had, I think we were mostly aware that we had more time than the movie had. That we had just 2 hours to get Jacob up and running as a vampire, which that's just like step one of the process, kind of.
Hmm.
I think the first one was freighted by having to establish, the journalist character and trying to sort of bring you into the whole story. So that a lot of the first episode was eaten up by just sort of setting the terms to get us to the story. But by episode two, it felt like we were sort of in the drama. We were in the we understand what the terms were. We understand about cross cutting in time between the present and the past. And so no, I wasn't aware that we had didn't feel like too much story. It felt like it was nice to do all the greatest hits, the first experience of sunlight, the first kill, the first hunting expedition.
Hmm.
Um,
That was a lovely scene, the opera scene.
it's funny. It's a beautiful opera house in downtown New Orleans. And someone once tried to explain New Orleans by saying, of all the American cities, it was the first to build an opera house and the last one to build a sewage system. It so their priorities are completely different
Is
from
that
each other.
true?
Yeah. It was the first city in America with a great opera house, and the last one to get modern plumbing and sewage, and the practicalities worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not sure. I have affection for both episodes, and in a way, I still felt more fond of episode two because it was sort of more the show. It was more terms had been set. And,
I mean, like with Daniel as well, like you said, we dealt quite a bit with Daniel in episode one, the journalist. But something that I found particularly interesting, and again, I wonder if this was intentional, is there's a lot of meal scenes in episode two.
Yeah,
So I think we get Louis drinking blood, and then he eats a rabbit, and then finally decides human food.
yeah, all kinds of. He's basically it's a he's kind of rattled at episode one, and he's trying to sort of get his power back, and he's kind of messing uh with the journalist with Daniel,
Mm.
and so he just sort of he gives them a 7 course gourmet meal, and is matching of course by course with things that he knows will just freak out.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, at one point the sort of the hitman, the guy comes in and lets him drink from his neck. He kills it. It's not a rabbit; it's a sand fox. We were very specific. I'm
And
not sure why it
fox.
was a sand fox, but it was a sand fox, uh, and we had to have it taxidermied for us. There was one that would twitch and one that would not twitch. Uh,
Sounds lovely.
yeah, and then I think the idea is that the food he's eating is offensive, but also in a way human food is offensive too. It all involves murder and it all
Yeah.
uh, but it was fun to have that sort of power struggle between the two of them at the dinner table. Sort of carries over the episode, sort of
Mm.
around the episode.
I think the interesting thing about that scene in particular is the fact that Daniel doesn't start opening up to him and speaking to him as if they're almost friends until Louis is eating the human food. Daniel slips and starts talking about, I think it's his ex-wife, and then kind of you see him stop himself. And it's like
Right.
for the first time he doesn't view him as a vampire. He views him almost as a friend.
Yeah, and at the end they share a dessert, which is the one meal they have in common, and
Yeah.
it's a it's a dessert that I chose because the first love of my life in Toronto. We used to go to this fancy restaurant before, but we could afford like to get dessert there, and that so we would get have this one fancy dessert, and so it was like the most romantic dessert in my mind. So they're both eating Bachelorette glacé, I think it's called. And there's the I remember liking how we ended the episode with a couple of shots where they sort of share the frame for the first time.
Yeah.
You understand there's some kind of connection being made between them. They are realizing that they're sort of in this together in a way.
I noticed that as well about pulling out, and the two of them are finally on equal footing. Nearly, they're
Yeah.
there. Yeah, that was beautiful. Um, and moving then to the later episodes, I knew you didn't direct them, but
So I have to refer you to the brilliant directors who did, like Levan, who's one of the recurring directors in season one, and is now sort of the lead director in season two. He's also got a new movie coming out. He's an amazing guy, Turkish Swedish combo that I don't quite understand. Um, but yeah, you should talk to him because I think he's become sort of in-house director for season two.
oh, very interesting. And I meant to ask you, no spoilers, obviously. You were executive producing again on season two. Will you be directing in season two?
I'm not directing season two. I got some uh, kidnapped by House of the Dragon, so I went back to Westeros. Did not think I would, but I'm in London right now as we speak, finishing season two of House of the Dragon. So I unfortunately could not go back, which was hard because I was really curious to see how I was going to play. They went up to Prague to shoot Paris
Yeah,
for season two, uh, and I was jealous that they got to do all that. But no, I'm not involved at all in season two. I can put you in touch with people who are.
that would be very well appreciated. Yeah, I think that's the bulk of the questions. One of the questions I wanted to ask you specifically because I know how invested you guys were was the dynamic between Louis and Lestat. Obviously, yes, it's a gothic romance. It's darker than your regular modern day romance, say. And there's little moments throughout the season where we see different aspects of them, different power dynamics. And one that stands out to me particularly and to a lot of viewers is the funeral scene. So it's Paul's funeral.
Right,
Lestat is calling to Louis, and Louis
right,
is kind of like overcome with grief. Yeah, he's like, go away, would you leave me alone a bit?
yeah,
Um, I viewed that personally as Lestat trying to take the pain away, trying to make him literally come to him so he could make it better. He's like, you know, you don't need to feel this. I could take it away. My partner argues that that is not the case, and that no, he was being manipulative and this, that, and the other, which he was in later episodes, but in this one instance, I don't think so. But I'm
yeah.
fascinated to
So
know your view on them.
no, that's I mean, well, like I'm really glad you guys are arguing, and like all the best stories. Hopefully, there's fodder for arguing, and because I think you're both right. I think there's when Louis is in the funeral procession, and Lestat actually comes to him and says, come on, let's. I think there's something sleazy, almost tacky about the fact that he would presume to intrude on that moment. So in
Mhm.
that way, you see the kind of the greedy side of Lestat. I think where he just sort of doesn't have patience for this human pain, and he just wants to sort of get his guy. But I think you are right. When he's sort of shoved him away and he's on the balcony, he's calling to him. I think it's more there's pain in his eyes, and he realizes that that Louis is suffering, and he's suffering at risk of losing Louis, and it doesn't have to be this way. And he knows that the pain doesn't have to it can end, as you say. So I think it can be both. I think he's he's the most dangerous kind of lover in that way because he's driven by greed and narcissism, but he's also deeply passionately in love and would probably sacrifice everything for the other. And they're all balled up together.
Yeah.
That's why it's so volatile. Yeah.
I think that is the beautiful thing about them, like you said, that people argue. People argue over the relationship, over how you view it, how you see it, what way it could be perceived. It's the fascinating thing that there's so much you could take from them.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's good writing and good acting. Thank you, Anne Rice. Thank you, Roland. And just very well played by the guys. And I wasn't sure how much people were going to buy into the relationship, like whether would it only work for gay men? Would it only work for would it speak to everyone? I think like any good writing about a relationship, it's truthful to its specifics, but it speaks to all of our experience. We all know what it's like to be overwhelmed by somebody in love and fearful and tempted and angry and grateful. And so it taps into a lot of things that we all struggle with.
Well, yeah, I think that's it. I've kept you long enough.
Thank you. You're right down to the hour. Perfect timing. It really is fun for me to do this because I haven't been able to talk about the show in a while since it's been out for a while. Season 2 will be coming very, very soon. I saw a couple of trailers that I'm looking at from the outside too. There's the wonderful scene outside the mansion where they're sort of killing everybody in the background while Armand and Louis
that beautiful scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that it continues at great level. But yeah, very nice to meet you, and give your mom a hug for me. Thank her for sending you in this direction.
I absolutely will. And thank you so much for being such a huge part of a project that really does mean so much to so many people, myself included. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Lovely meeting you.
You too. Bye-bye.
And that is it for this video. This is one of my favorites I've done in a while, I have to say. I'm very passionate about this show, as you may be able to tell. And absolutely wonderful to get to hear from inside a mind that was directly involved with creating it, working on it, bringing it to life, bringing it to screen. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Season 2 is coming out in May 12th, I believe. Maybe I have the dates wrong, don't quote me on that. But the promo images have come out, the teaser trailers come out, and I am so excited. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you all soon.